We use this model usually in military and law enforcement institutes. It's the most restrictive model. So it has a lot of restrictions and all that kind of stuff, like people need a special kind of security clearance to access particular data and all that stuff. That is why this model is not recommended for corporate world. So corporate world, they don't use this particular model, but it is very well suitable model for military and all those kind of stuff, where we have top secret information and all that things. In mandatory access control model, there are two main things. One is called label, second is called level. So each object is labeled. Each object is basically labeled, and that defines the sensitivity of information that which this object actually holds, while level is the hierarchy of classification, or you can say hierarchy of data, like how classified data is and all that kind of stuff. So a label, let me give you the better idea to understand the label and all that. So in mandatory access control model, what happens, for example, you have a user account, let's say alice@mil.gov, for example. That's your account. So after specific security clearance, you will be issued the number of labels. So having the label assigned to you, or if you have a label, so then you can access the specified data or information associated with that label. And how the label looks like: a label has two main things. First of all, label defines the sensitivity level of information, and then compartment, like from which particular data you can access. For example, sensitivity of data is top secret. Maybe within top secret you can access nuclear, or you can access some chemical weapons. And once you have this particular label issued to you, then it means you can access that particular data. Let me give you some basic idea about this classification of data. So in military setup, the most highly restricted data is called top secret, TS. Top secret is the innermost or highest confidential data, or whatever you want to name it. After the top secret tier, then we have another tier which is called secret. It holds the secret data. Then after the secret, we have confidential data. So confidential data. After confidential tier, then we have restricted, which is accessible only to the few people. And then after restricted, the last level is unclassified, which is basically a public domain kind of data. So basically, if you have a label like top secret label, it doesn't mean that you can access all these particular data. You need to get those specified security clearance into access in order to access the data. So what does it mean? It means a user might have, let's say, a user account like alice@mil.gov. She might have label 1, label 2, or maybe 20 labels, depending upon the security clearance and what kind of information she needs to access to perform her job and all that. So this model is called mandatory access control model. The most important point to note down is it's the most restricted model, and which have label and levels. Labels, each object has a label, and user account will be issued the label after the security clearance. Then we have the third. Then we have a third formal model or access control. Third model is called the role-based access control. It is called role-based access control model, or you can call it non-DAC, non-discretionary access control model as well. It's a very straightforward model and most commonly used in corporate world, and in most of the companies they actually use this particular model. So role-based access control model, what this model is, in this model, user can access resources based on their job responsibilities. Job responsibilities or job description. So you can access those particular data, those particular things which you might need in order to perform your job. That is a role-based access control model, most practical type of data, in fact. Next is the last one is the called rule-based access control model. As I mentioned, it is also known as attribute-based access control model as well. Rule-based access control model is usually used in dynamic organizations. In dynamic organizations. Dynamic organization means where things change very quickly. For example, you are doing, kind of the project-driven organization where things change very quickly. For example, you might have a project of a website development, even though you are a security expert or security guy, but you need to do that particular stuff. In order to make a website, you might need access different kind of resources. So dynamic organization, they use rule-based access control model. So basically rules are assigned to objects, like under which circumstances or under what circumstances users can access this resource. So rules are assigned to object rather than assigning or making a small database. So we assign the rule to the object, to the resources. So resource has a rule, in fact, a rule book. So what happens? For example, subjects request to access object. Then what will happen? Kernel will check. So the kernel will check. So kernel will check the rules of object. Rules of object to see whether this subject can access the resource or object, provided or giving the condition, in fact, or under that particular circumstances. So rule-based access control system are specifically designed for smaller organization where things change very quickly. Now the last thing, which is basically slide 22, last thing for today, for this particular part, slide 22, where we have some best practices for access control. Best practices for access control. So for the best practice of access control, there are a couple of things. One is basically separation of duties. I believe most of you guys have already you're already aware of what is basically separation of duty. Separation of duties are basically like split or divide critical task between two or more people. So rather than giving full access to one individual, you can divide the critical task between two or more people. Second is the job rotation. Job rotation, it can also expose many potential security risk and all that. Then least privilege is another one. Least privilege. Least privilege is another point. User can access whatever they're supposed to access or what they need to access. The fourth one is implicit deny. Like system, there should be no like second option, for example, for wrong password or something like that. The system should implicit deny all these things. Number 5 is mandatory vacations. In many organizations, they do this mandatory vacations. So just to see, after sending you on vacation, they can see what exactly you have done so far and all that kind of stuff. So in the part 2, we will discuss the implementation of access control system, like access control layers, group policies, and all that stuff. And we will also discuss some formal access authentication systems.